All right. Hello, everyone. You are listening to the Minding Mind podcast, where we live life with ease, connection, and permission to just be. I'm your host, Evelyn LeVasseur, and I welcome you back to another episode. Now, I'm going to tell you ahead of time that today's guest, Mia Hanks, is going to talk about what I feel could be a sensitive or almost triggering topic. We're talking about narcissistic abuse. And the reason I say sensitive or triggering is because I'm really believing now that more and more people are dealing with narcissism, not because it is more rampant, but because we understand more, because we recognize more, and because we can talk about it more. So I'm happy to provide a space where this conversation can be open with understanding, with compassion, and to help whoever it is that needs to hear what we're going to talk about. So first, let me tell you, Mia is a survivor of narcissistic abuse. She was married to a covert narcissist for 29 years and is now passionate about raising awareness and helping other victims find their voices. Mia, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm happy to have you here. So the reason that I started or had the introduction, just because I feel like, first of all, I feel like the word narcissism is being thrown around today to encompass like all levels of selfishness. But I think that when someone has truly experienced narcissistic abuse, it is not the same as random acts of selfishness. Could you maybe start by talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, narcissist is a term that is so overused. And, we tend to call people narcissists, and we're really not using the term correctly. So, someone who is arrogant, overconfident, they're not a narcissist. As humans, we all have narcissistic traits, but we're not all narcissists. So, it's a very, very different thing. Someone with narcissistic personality disorder, they have a personality disorder. It's rooted in who they are, and it is them. It's who they are. They generally have no empathy. They cannot self-reflect. They can't see things from other people's perspectives. And, the world revolves around them, their needs, wants, wishes. And, they tend to think everyone's jealous of them. They a lot of times are paranoid. They think everyone wants what they have. It's just a whole way of living that is totally different than just having selfish traits.
That is so, that's such a clear, just a clear description of just that difference of it's not about being arrogant or being overly confident or, even walking around with this air. It is literally a personality disorder that determines how you interact in every area of your life.
Yes, it is absolutely everything you do it is determined by that personality disorder. And interestingly enough, covert narcissism, like
Mm.
what I dealt with, those people are not outwardly arrogant or pompous or confident. They oftentimes play the victim. They appear in public as compassionate, very kind, humble, wonderful people. And behind closed doors, of course, that's just a mask they're wearing. Behind closed doors, they are controlling, they're dominating, they're manipulative, and the world revolves around them. So it's an odd thing, they sort of are living a double life. And for the victim, it makes it very complicated because then out in public, who's going to believe you if you try to say, well, actually, this person is very abusive? No one's going to believe you because they only see this wonderful person, and they say, well, there's no way that they can be that bad character behind closed doors.
So let me ask, what do you think it is that makes them this covert narcissist? Because there are different categories, but this covert narcissist that is very kind and loving and empathetic, presenting in public, what makes them need to behave that way in front of other people if at their core they lack empathy for other people anyway? What is it that makes them need other people to see them a certain way?
That's interesting. And I don't know the answer, but if I had to venture a guess, they need to be They need to be liked. They want to feel like they are important. And so I think striving to gain the acceptance of other people, because I think, a narcissist at their core, they're not a confident person. They are very broken people. And a lot of times one common thread that is seen in people with NPD is some type of neglect in their childhood. That seems to be a common thread in all narcissism. And so I think, they do seek some validation. They are seeking acceptance. And for the covert, being out there, having people just bow down to them because they're so nice and wonderful and compassionate and caring. I would assume that's why they want to wear that mask to gain acceptance.
It's so interesting when you look at it from yes, we look at the situation and say, I cannot believe somebody lives like this. But I've read and watched specials around narcissism, and there's usually, like you mentioned, this general thread of this deep self-hatred,
Yeah,
actually, that
yeah.
presents itself as trying to break everyone around them to prove to themselves that they are better, that they are valuable, that they are worthy, because clearly, if everyone else around them is awful, then they must be doing something right.
Yeah, I do think it's, they do have a sense of brokenness.
Mm,
They are trying to repair and stepping on other people and elevating themselves higher. I guess they feel like that helps heal these
mm,
inner wounds that they have.
mm.
But it generally does stem from some sort of abuse and neglect in childhood. And it
Interesting.
is sad. It is sad. And my ex-husband, he fit that category.
Mhm.
He did experience neglect in childhood. Not that he was from a bad home, but his emotional needs were not met as a child. It was very clear from his family dynamic. And I've pondered this, and you feel sorry for him. And yeah, he didn't have the best upbringing, but on the flip side, you have to say, but does that give these people an excuse to
Mhm.
abuse somebody else?
Yeah.
And we can feel sorry and say, I wish things had been better for you growing up. I wish your emotional needs had been met, but it's not my job to fix that.
Right.
I can't fix that.
Mhm.
And it certainly does not give you the permission to abuse me.
Mhm.
So that's, something that victims, I think, have a hard time understanding. At least I know I did.
Yeah, I think when you vow to be with someone and to love them, you coming from a healthier mental perspective, you believe that the hard times are where you work together. Um,
Right.
right? But I would assume in a situation like this, it's never really a true working together on anything.
No, no. I mean, it's you giving up yourself for them, and they don't work, you do the work, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
You are almost, it's almost like a servant. And it's your job to fix them. It's your
Mhm.
job to fix any problem they have. You can fix this, but you can't, we can be supportive, but
Mhm.
we can't fix what went wrong in their childhood. And
Mhm.
I think at least my ex-husband, I think he thought I could. I think he thought he expected that of me. So it's a misconception, though, but we
Yeah,
can't heal someone's childhood.
yeah. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what was it that made you make this decision for yourself after almost 30 years of being in this marriage? What made you choose you, and how was that received?
It was a tough decision, and it really came down to my physical health.
Mm,
My physical health was suffering under all of the stress I lived under. Walking on eggshells all the time, it really starts to wear on you. I was experiencing chronic pain, stomach issues, headaches, extreme sleep deprivation. And really, it was my physical health where I had to stop and say, I don't think this is sustainable anymore.
mhm,
Narcissism does not get better. It gets worse with age. So every year, a little bit worse, a little bit worse. And I think the aha moment for me came, it was just a random thing. One night I was scrolling through social media. I was on Instagram and I came across a quote about true intimacy. And
Mhm.
it was saying that true intimacy is not necessarily physical. It's more about being able to look at your partner and say, I feel safe with you. And that spoke to me. And I thought, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. And then I had to ask myself the question, well, why don't I feel safe? And that sort of set me on this journey of doing some research. I just, I got on Google and I just started Googling toxic marriages. And, I just wanted to know the answer to the question, why don't I feel safe? And that led me to discovering narcissism, covert narcissism. And, that just, I had all my answers right there.
Did you
So,
did you
yeah.
immediately recognize yourself in what you were reading?
I think I did, but it's hard to admit it. It really is. It's hard to admit. I know I was afraid to use the word abuse. And I remember I sought out a therapist. That was kind of my first step I just needed to talk to somebody about this that had some knowledge. And I was afraid to use that word because I felt like that's not a word we should just use flippantly. That's a big word. And I didn't want to just be throwing that around. And I remember asking the therapist, is this abuse? Because I didn't know. And I think I didn't want to admit it either. There's
Mhm.
an embarrassment there. And I think most people who haven't lived in that situation, they don't understand that.
Yeah.
But there's an embarrassment to having to admit that you have allowed yourself to be abused,
Mhm.
especially for that long. But yeah, I did see myself in what I was reading, but it's hard to accept it.
Yeah. I mean, I think also with that embarrassment that you're talking about, just the phrase that I allowed myself to be treated that way, in a way, makes you take ownership for the situation. When in reality, if it was abuse, there's no there's no choice, right? You didn't
That's
choose,
true. That's
right?
true.
Like if you look at it, you didn't choose abuse. You didn't choose this path. Your intentions were never rooted in you feeling worse.
True.
So that's why I love just being able to discuss it, just being able to hold space for each other. It kind of releases some of that shame around blaming yourself or even trying to take responsibility for what happened. Like, yes, you made choices. Yes, you were in this relationship. Yes, you stayed in this relationship for a long time, but never with the intention of being treated poorly.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was living in this fantasy world of, my thinking wasn't clear. I had been gaslit, for so many years, and I was in a fog, and I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking logically. I see that now, but I just kept holding on to, well, if I just stay in a little bit longer, if I just try to do a little bit better, this will fix itself. It's gonna get better. The next stage of life, the kids are getting older, we'll be in retirement in a few years. It's gonna get better then, there won't be as much stress. It doesn't get better. But yeah, and then of course, back to the embarrassment, people on the outside that don't understand what has actually been going on in your house, the first thing they want to say is, well, if it was that bad, how could you stay for 29 years? Right? They don't understand that there's just a lot of layers there. Why does somebody stay? There's a lot of reasons, a lot of reasons. So it's easy on the outside to say, well, how bad could it have been, right? 29 years. Nobody would stay that long if it was that bad, but you'd be surprised.
I think honestly, and that statement in and of itself, that which I can totally picture people saying, like, why did you stay then? Like, why would you do that? If somebody were, why wouldn't you just leave? That statement in and of itself, I feel like is just another way of learning that even the people in your life who may have even presented as your support system weren't a safe space either, right? For
Very true.
somebody to look at you and know your heart and know who you are and to think for a second that the first response is, you should have done something different. It just tells you, it's such a tell as to why it took you as long as you did, right?
Yeah.
There's a part of you that says, I should have left earlier. I'm sure that you've had that conversation with yourself. There's a part
Oh,
of you that,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
there's a part of you that has to recognize, in order to feel safe to leave, you would have needed a lot more safety in your support system.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing that I think outsiders don't really understand, at least in my situation, I was married very young. I was 21
Mhm.
years old.
Mhm.
And we're naive at 21. I
Mhm.
think,
Mhm.
everybody is. And this lifestyle that I was living, it became my normal.
Mhm.
And so I didn't have a lot to compare it to. I mean, at
Mhm.
21, just starting out, and no, it didn't look like other marriages that I had seen
Mhm.
growing up. I came from a healthy background. So it didn't seem like, what I had witnessed, but
Mhm.
at the same time, you think, well, it's growing pains. That's kind
Mhm.
of what I thought. It's growing pains. But after a while, it becomes your normal. So when people say, "How can you stay for so long?" Well, it's what I knew. So that's another, I think, misconception. You don't just wake up one day and say, I think this is abuse. You just wake up and say, well, this is my life. This is what it looks like.
I also think then you couple that with the fact that people are constantly saying, well, marriage is hard and you have ups and downs and it's not always going to be great. Where I feel like marriage is hard. Being
Yeah.
in a relationship with another human being, I've been married almost 20 years. Next year will be 20 years. And there's nothing easy about it. There's nothing
Right.
easy about consistently compromising. There's nothing easy about sharing your every thought and every responsibility with another human being. It's difficult. And then you throw kids into the mix, it's more difficult,
It is.
but it should also be beautiful, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and that's the part that people miss. I feel like my marriage can be very difficult at times. And it is hard, but it is also so beautiful that when people say marriage is, that's just the way it is, I feel like they leave out the whole other part of it, that it's not supposed to be hard all the time.
Right. And it does have to be beautiful, right? And
Yes.
that was missing in my life. And I think I didn't realize it was missing. I just thought marriage is hard and it's just hard, right? And then there was no flip side.
Yeah.
So and being young and just thinking this is how it is.
Mhm.
But no, I mean, with a narcissist, it's hard and there is no beautiful. That's not
Mm.
to say that you don't have good days though. And that was what I struggled with when I left, because I kept saying I felt very guilty when I left.
Mm.
And I kept saying to myself, every day wasn't bad. So maybe it was okay. Maybe the
Mhm.
bad days were okay if there were some good days in there too.
Mhm.
But I realized and I had a friend that pointed this out to me. It's not a math equation. A good day does not cancel out a bad day.
Mm.
And I had to realize that. And that was where I was able to finally let go of my guilt that I was
Yeah.
experiencing. But yeah,
Mm.
that's not to say there are not good times, but beautiful, no, there was no beauty in that
Yeah.
marriage. So
You
interesting.
know, I'm first of all grateful for friends who can have open conversations like that and trust that you can receive it. Like, that's beautiful too. And I also think that I wish we were all raised to recognize that even if there were more good days than there were bad days, and your gut tells you that this doesn't feel good to you, then it's still not right for you. And that's okay too. Right?
That was a kind of a breaking moment for
Mm.
me. I mean, just realizing it was eye-opening when I was having that discussion with a friend, and my friend said, there are not enough good days in the world to make up for one day of trauma that he put you through. And I thought, wow, really? I mean, that just really hit me. And at that point, that was when that conversation was the day that I let go of the guilt and said, okay, that's right. You're right.
That's amazing that your friend was able to hold that space for you. I love that. Let me ask you, there's a couple things that I would love to talk about, but you talked about another, what I feel is a buzzword that's getting thrown around like crazy, gaslighting. What does gaslighting mean, and that show up for you in your marriage? Can you give like examples of things that you were gaslit with?
Yeah, gaslighting, you're right. It's thrown around. And most of the time that I hear the word, it's used incorrectly. Gaslighting doesn't mean lying. People think it's the same, one and the same. It's not. Gaslighting is complex. So, for example, if my husband said something hurtful or did something hurtful, which happened every day, if I were to call him out on that and say, when you said this or when you did this, it was very hurtful to me. His response, a normal response would be to apologize, to say, oh, I didn't, it wasn't my intention to hurt you. I'm so sorry. But my husband, his response would be to flip that around and say, well, if you were normal, that wouldn't have bothered you. You're too sensitive and there's something wrong with you psychologically because a normal person wouldn't have been offended by what I said. And so rather than him apologizing, he flips it around to where by the end of the conversation, I feel like I'm sorry I even brought it up. And I'm left thinking, well, I think I'm the problem. I think and he would say, you're remembering that wrong. That's not how it happened. Or you misinterpreted what I said. And you really start to think maybe I'm the crazy one. And that's exactly, and then you are left thinking, well, when things bother me, I really don't even want to bring them up now because then I end up feeling bad when he's the one that should feel bad. It's just this reversal of roles. So gaslighting is very effective in basically stripping someone's self-esteem and self-worth. You really think there's something wrong with you.
It feels so layered and so intentional too, like that flip, that manipulation, that throwing in also the little jab about if it were normal, if you were normal, right? All
Yes,
that
yes.
questioning. I want to ask, how does that feeling during the day, right? Like that feeling during the day of maybe I am crazy, maybe I am losing it, maybe, all the things that go through your head. How does that impact your ability to relax and be physically intimate?
You can't relax.
Mm.
You can't. With a narcissist, at least in my position, you're always being scrutinized. You're always being ridiculed. You're never enough for that narcissist. There's nothing you can do that is ever enough. I mean, you can give them the sun and the moon and the stars, and they will find a reason that you didn't. Why didn't you give me more? Why didn't you give me two suns? You know? And so, no, there's no relaxing. Everything from the victim standpoint, I think other victims would probably agree that this walking on eggshells, everything is calculated. You basically are living this life where you're kind of almost planning what you're going to say, so that you don't trigger them. The only time I could ever relax in my marriage was when he wasn't home. I can remember, and I talked about this on another podcast recently. Some of the best times I can remember are when he would leave on a business trip, and when he would get in that car and drive away, I felt like, oh, I can breathe now. I've got it was like being on vacation. I've got a couple of days that I can actually, just relax and do some self-care. So yeah, there's no relaxing with a narcissist. And I think if I had to describe my marriage in one word, it would be exhausting. It's very exhausting to walk on eggshells all the time, for sure.
I mean, I can't imagine the emotional trauma, but then also that physical trauma, that your nervous system is never in a calm, connected state. There's like this silent anxiety carried with you all the time. How long has it been since you left your marriage? And do you feel like you can connect with this quiet, this welcome quiet in your life?
Yeah, I left my marriage about almost 3 years ago.
Mhm.
My divorce has only been final for 1 year, though. I left, and it took a year I really had to go through some healing before I could even file for divorce. That was a terrifying thought. And I just, it took a year to get ready for that. So I've been out for about 3 years, and life is very quiet. I've come to enjoy quiet. I enjoy being bored. I don't take that for granted. And and I can being able to make those decisions for myself every day. How am I going to spend my day? Who am I going to talk to? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? I get to make all those decisions.
Mhm.
So it can be overwhelming for sure, because I go from being 100% controlled to completely free. It's a huge leap, but it's exciting, it's overwhelming, but definitely exciting. And yeah, I love quiet. I love quiet.
Too. Me too. I want to ask how did you tell, I'm sorry, I'm going to delete that part. How did you tell him that you wanted a divorce and how did he take it?
So when I left, I sort of left slowly. My parents lived near me, and I would start staying at their house and kind of making excuses for why I needed to stay there. And, I just slowly started spending less time at home. He was a little puzzled. Our kids were grown at this point, so, I had the freedom to be able to do that. And eventually I just told him I need some space. I need a break. And he just thought, oh, she's just overreacting, just being silly. He didn't take me seriously at all. And he figured, in a couple weeks I'd be back. And that didn't happen. And over time, he got more and more disgruntled. And finally, like I say, it took a year. And I was lessening my contact with him. I never went no contact. That didn't feel safe. But we reached a point where we were only communicating via text. And I literally sent him a text and said, I've been on my own for however long it had been there, almost a year. And I said, this is working for me. And I said, I'm going to file for divorce. Seems strange to do it in a text, but with a narcissist, a phone call was not going to work. So
I also think that in the situation that you were in, there is nothing that you could say that can make me judge the way you handled yourself. Self-preservation is very personal, very
yeah,
individual, right? And if that's what it took for you to do what you felt was right for you in the moment, then it was absolutely the right thing and you get zero judgment from me. I don't care
yeah.
if it was a text or a telegram. It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I the message came across regardless of how it was delivered.
Mhm.
And yeah, then life got interesting
Mhm.
after I sent that text, because then of course you don't tell a narcissist no. It's not in their playbook, and they don't take it well.
Yeah,
So it wasn't
yeah.
received good,
Mhm.
but he basically, at that point, we never spoke again. And, he started draining the bank account, doing all kinds of stuff so that, to make my life miserable,
Mhm.
basically. It was sort of like, you're leaving me, so you are going to pay for this. Yeah, it was not a fun time, but in retrospect, I definitely would have still made that same decision if I had
Yeah.
it to do over again. My
Mhm.
only difference would be I would have done it sooner.
How did your children handle the news?
They were both, grown out of high school. My son was graduating actually at
Mhm.
that time. And, it wasn't, they didn't see it as a bad thing.
Mhm.
They knew their dad had issues.
Mhm.
And of course they lived with him, and they knew, and they struggled in their relationship with him just like I did.
Mhm.
But honestly, they were very supportive of me. And they still have a good relationship with their dad. I mean, he's their dad, right? But they are very happy for me that I'm not with him. So I think one thing that really hit me was a little ways into my journey of my divorce. One of my kids did come to me and say, you should have done this 10, 15 years ago. And I thought, yeah, you're right. You're right. Life would have been so different for all of us. But it is what it is.
Mhm.
And they are very supportive. They were never negative about, why did you leave dad? They knew. Kids know more than we give them credit for. They're more intuitive, even at a young age. And they knew that I was not in a good place. So they are very happy for me now.
I think also we think that what they want is for the family to be together, right? We picture this together as meaning the thing that makes them happy. But what
Right.
makes them happy is a happy parent. Um,
That's right. And my
yeah.
relationship with my kids has changed dramatically
Mm,
since leaving. I'm not that tense, nervous, anxiety-ridden parent anymore. So I realize now that had I left many, many years ago, I could have been the parent I wanted to be for them. And unfortunately, I didn't have that option. I wish I could have been a different parent for them, but living in that circumstance, I mean, I think they've cut me a little slack and they know that it was hard. But yeah, the whole idea of stay together for the kids, it's not always the best advice. My kids got to witness a toxic marriage, and that's what they know. So I wish it wasn't that way. But, they're grown now and we've been able to have good conversation about it. And, I think we all have a good relationship now. And for their sake, I really do wish I, would have done this sooner. But it is what it is, and we just carry on.
I feel like I do tend to always think about like the things that I didn't know, I just didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And you remove the guilt of who you weren't or who you couldn't be, and you can replace it with this joy and excitement about who you're becoming and the new relationship that you're forging with your kids, the new mom that they get meet, right? Like you
Yeah.
are literally showing them an entirely different version of someone they already love so deeply. So it's like you loving your kids as your full self for the first time.
Yeah, it's just a different outlook,
Mm.
and they see that I have a different outlook. They get to see me happy, and I think that makes them happy. I mean, I think we want to see our parents happy, and kids want to see their parents happy, and parents want to see their kids happy.
Have you had any contact with your ex at all?
No, I have not,
Mm.
interestingly enough. And I'm fortunate in that my kids are grown. And I don't have to have that, custody and family court. And so no, I have not spoken to him. I saw him the day of the court date when the judge signed our papers, and that was a year ago. So
Wow.
no, I've had no contact. And it's best that way.
Mm.
And it's
Wow.
weird too. It's weird too because you've spent so many years of your life with this person, and he in his mind, he has erased me.
Mhm.
I left him. I made him feel dejected, and therefore he's erased me from his life. And that's okay. That's okay.
That's hard, but it is okay, right? Like it's hard,
Yeah.
but it's
It
also
is
better for
hard.
you.
It's weird, really.
Mhm.
I tend to, you wonder about people. You
Yeah.
care about people. He's not a good person, but at the
Hmm.
same time, I spent 29 years with him,
Hmm.
marriage, and I think 2 years dating. So, I mean, I spent a good chunk of my life with him. And how you can just literally erase someone
Yeah.
off the face of the earth is crazy to me. It's
Hmm.
almost like a light switch, like
Yeah.
he just flipped a light switch and I don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And even my kids, it's funny, my kids will say, he will never say my name. He does not refer to me. So it's very odd. But
Mm.
it's on one hand, for me, it's probably healthier
Yeah.
that he's not bothering me. I mean, he is, but not in a contact kind of way.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just a strange, narcissists are very strange beings.
Mm. And I think that so much of the pain in dealing with them is trying to understand them.
It really is. It really is. And it's hard for us to understand them because the traits they have are not traits that a normal human. I mean,
Mhm.
you can't wrap your head around how these people think unless you're in a relationship with one of
Mhm.
these people. If I'm telling other people things about him, I'm not even sure people would believe me.
Mhm.
It's just it is very outlandish
Mhm.
how they think and how their mind works.
Yeah. Mia, what would you tell a woman that was feeling the things that you felt, having these red flags go off in her head, like something is not normal and I want to leave, but she is terrified of backlash she's going to get from family, from friends, from who the narcissistic abuser will, enroll into his plan, right? Like,
Oh, they do.
what
Yes.
do you tell her? What words do you have to encourage her in whatever part of her journey she's in?
I think it comes down to you have to just put your foot down and choose you. And that's hard for a victim of narcissistic abuse because you've probably never been allowed to choose you before. But you have to reach that point where you say, I don't care what other people say. I don't care about the embarrassment. I don't care what the backlash is going to be. I have to choose me and I have to leave because it's just these relationships are not sustainable. They're not going to get better. And the stress it's going to cause on your physical body, it's just not worth it. And it's not easy to leave. There are a lot of facets that are just very complicated, but it is doable. It is doable. And there are resources, there's support. And I would just encourage anybody to start planning your escape because, and it's never too late. People think, well, I've been in this marriage for so long and I just can't get out now. But you absolutely can. You absolutely can.
It feels, I feel heavy in my heart for the woman that is dealing with this, even for the version of you that dealt with this, because freedom is so beautiful and
It
not
is.
everybody gets to feel that. And honestly, making the choice itself is scary, but on the other side, like, you just have to get there first,
You just have to get there, and you can get there. I mean, it's not easy, right? But also, it's not easy. I mean, if you're married to a narcissist and you look at what you are doing every day, that's not easy either.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's not easy to leave, but you've already put in the hard work, right? Just being in a relationship with them. If you can do that, you can leave. You can get out.
Mhm. That's such a clear perspective there. Like, leaving is so hard, but also staying every day is so hard too. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Mia, I really appreciate you being so open to this conversation because I do think that more people are impacted by this type of abuse. And I do also think that a lot of people in this situation convince themselves that it's not abuse because it's not physical.
Yes.
And maybe for some people, it is physical as well. But a lot of women talk themselves out of it because they're not bruised.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to thank you for being so open and being so honest and for choosing you and being able to help other women do the same now. How do you help other women?
You mean like as far as them contacting me or
Yeah.
resources? Well, I have a website, miajhanks.com, and there's a link to my book on there. You can purchase on Amazon. And one thing I really enjoy, I have a TikTok account that I use to try to educate about narcissism, and I try to put, lots of tips on there about if you're in this type of situation and what you can do, and just basically helping people understand what narcissism is. So, and I'm really active on that. I really enjoy that. You can check me out it's at NPD and me. And like I say, I'm just trying to raise awareness about it. There are far too many women trapped in these relationships, and it weighs on me.
I'm going to make sure that everything is linked in the show notes, and I'll definitely be checking out your channel. Can you now answer the question of the hour? I ask at the end of every show a question about legacy, because for me, I really believe that everything that we go through is for us, but it's not about us, right? The things we go through help you reach your purpose, help you reach your impact, help you make life a little bit easier, better, faster for someone else. The road that you traveled helps you help them get there with a little more clarity. So, minding mine is all about being authentic, choosing you, learning to follow your gut instincts, living a life aligned with who you are and who you want to be. How do you think that minding yours impacts the legacy that you'll leave?
I mean, I like to think of I guess the adage of leaving things better than you found them, wanting to make an impact that makes the world a better place, right? Because you were in it. So trying to speak up for those people, trying to give people a voice that don't have a voice, I think is a legacy that is, I would like to think that I could leave that kind of legacy, that I could, help people that don't think they have a voice find their voice.
That's beautiful. And I hope that at a minimum, you recognize how needed you are and how courageous it is to be as authentic and open as you are, considering the things that you've gone through. So I'm grateful for who you are and who you've become and how you continue to help other women, be able to get a little more peace in their heart and their days by choosing themselves first.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Mia, thank you for being here. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today and tuning into another episode of Minding Mine. And remember, if this episode resonates with you, make sure to comment, rate, and review the podcast. Your feedback helps me grow. And until next time, I want you to go live your life on your terms and please mind your business. We will catch you in the next episode.